If you are being tested by God or the devil at this time, then you have to take into consideration two things. Number one, you have to understand that as a chosen one, that is someone that is doing one's best to follow God, you are responsible for doing the right thing. Not the right thing for you, the right thing. And that is not going to be very fun all the time. It's not going to be a walk in the park. That's not going to be a sunshine and rainbows and lollipops kind of day sometimes. Number two, you have to take into consideration that the enlightenment path is a process. How often have you seen people reach enlightenment and they're done? No, that has never happened, not even with Jesus or Buddha or any of the other self-awakened individuals in the world that have existed ever. Think about Alan Watts as well, or Krishnamurti, or Ramana Maharishi, or any of these people that were actually with the self. And I also think Carl Jung was enlightened as well, and a lot of many other people in the world. But it's also very clear that you don't just get to one point in the enlightenment process. I remember a story with Krishnamurti. He said something like, this guru was claiming that he was enlightened and he knows all and he knows everything and all that. And Krishnamurti looks at him and says, well, what happens when you pick up the water from the ocean? Like, if you scoop up the water from the ocean, what happens? And the guru says, well, it falls right back in. And the Krishnamurti says something like, that's exactly what enlightenment is. You know, you just when you think you've got it in your hand, it just falls right back into the great ocean of life. And so that's what you have to understand as well and take into consideration while you're being tried and tested. Now, the devil will come to test you in many different ways. Obviously, it's with the sins that you are struggling with most. And something that I've thought about recently, which is very interesting, I think anyway, that's why I'm talking about it, is that your sins are actually your shadow expressing itself and yearning for wholeness. Now, what exactly does that mean for anybody that does not know what the shadow is? The shadow is it's a Jungian idea developed by Carl Jung, and the shadow represents all of the aspects about a personality that you would rather not look at. It's basically the parts of your personality that you put into a box that says, do not open, and you put it away in the closet of your mind, and you don't want to look at it. But the thing is that sooner or later that box is going to jump out, and it's going to want to express itself in some way, shape, or form. Now, how exactly does it happen? Well, for me, for example, I repressed a lot of my sexuality growing up, and I repressed a lot of my urges for sexuality as well. And semen retention has been a very healing process for me, even though I didn't really even know that I needed it more so than I did at the time that I started over a year ago. And something that I've learned is that, again, you don't repress anything. Especially your sexuality, you should not repress that, because that's the second most powerful drive that you have as a human being. However, you need to learn how to express it or transmute it in different ways, in some kind of form of creativity, of music or writing or just working on something else, something that is going to actually allow you to build resources rather than lose your life source. That's really the goal there. And so also something that you need to realize as well is when the devil's testing you, you're likely going to be leveling up spiritually and ascending in the kingdom of heaven internally when the devil's trying you with your sins, with the sins that you do not want to look at. So, for example, with me, I've been tested with lust a lot over the past year, especially with semen retention. I've been tested a lot with lust because I repressed it for so long, and now it's almost like I developed myself to a point to where I'm now approaching the pinnacle of my beginnings of the slow burn in my value as a sexual marketplace participant, I guess you could say. And the reason for that is because my finances are getting on point, my body is getting on point, my emotional health is better than ever, my spiritual health is better than ever. And my physical health, I'm in the best shape of my life physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, everything. And then that's not like gloating. That's just, I've done so much work over the past few years to make myself into this person that I am today. And now that I'm getting to the point to where I'm able to create and sustain a foundation, now that I have that foundation, it's going to be tested. But fear not, because God is with you. When you have your foundation, God is going to be with you. And it may seem like he's not at sometimes. It may seem like he's silent. But that's when you have to draw even closer to, I would say, how would you describe it? It's not necessarily prayer itself, but it's the conscious actions and the self-talk that you must have in order to perpetuate yourself to spiritual excellence. And that comes with applying pressure to your life in one way, shape, or form or another. You must 100% stick to whatever plan that you have, but you also need a plan. So you have to generate a certain kind of goal or strategy in order to get to a certain place, right? And then it's kind of like if you're on some kind of traveling arc in your life, let's say, like if you're going on, I wouldn't say vacation, but you have a designation in mind. Well, certain roads along the way might be under construction, or they might be closed, and you might have to take other roads. But those other roads might actually lead you to a place where you needed to actually go, and you needed to experience certain things and roads there in order to help you become this version of yourself that you are today. So that comes with also doing the right thing. It comes with also knowing what to do in these situations. What is the right thing to do? How do you know what the right thing to do is? Well, that takes spiritual discernment, and that takes a lot of courage and discipline as well. And if you do not have courage or discipline, it's going to be very difficult to apply pressure in your life, because that has to come internally. That has to come internally, because if ever, and this goes especially for women, if there is any kind of aspect in your relationship as a woman to a man where you have to almost like challenge him or like try to push him to do more, to be more ambitious, that's not going to work. That relationship will fail. And the reason being is because the man has to have that drive internally. If he does not have that drive internally, the whole foundation of the relationship will collapse. And I know because I've seen it in multiple different relationships all throughout my life. In fact, I'm not going to say names, of course, on this channel, but I know of one situation where they actually got married, and they were seemingly doing fairly well, and they were making decent money, and they had a life together, and they were high school sweethearts, and they were together for 5 or 6 years, but then the guy started to fall off. He just stopped trying, gained a lot of weight, and didn't really have that same ambition that he did when he was in high school. And the woman left him. They divorced. And it was a surprise for me because it was like when I saw these people together when I was younger, it was almost like they were like you would look at them and you would think, yeah, they're going to be together forever. But that was a test on their part that they failed. And I wouldn't recommend this is one of the reasons why vetting and pre-selecting women is so important as a man in relationships, and especially as a woman. You don't want to waste your time on somebody. Like, you don't want to bet on the wrong horse in the race. And I understand that. I completely understand that. But we also have to understand that, if you take care of yourself, if you know how to take care of yourself, for both men and women, you're generally going to be okay. Like, yeah, you may not have the most spectacular house, or you may not have the most spectacular this or the spectacular that, but you'll be okay. And look, women, if the man is giving you room and board, that should be enough. Like that should be well enough for you to accept what he has to offer. Because anything else is extra. Granted, and that's where, like, I'm not against women wanting to work. Like, if you want to work, that's fine. But that's also going to be a test in the relationship. And the man has to be able to determine how to lead that properly with God at the head. Because if God was not, because God wasn't at the head of that relationship that I just described to you, that was Satan. That was the devil himself at the end there. They got stagnant, they got complacent. And this is why you must never remain stagnant or complacent in your relationships. Is it okay to have a routine? Absolutely. However, it is not okay to be complacent. Because when you're complacent, that's when the devil comes into play and the seeds of the devil start to get planted. And it's like a weed. It's actually more of a weed than it is a seed, I suppose. Because the weed will just eat everything around the actual fruits of your labor. And what good is that? Why would you, if you could get rid of the weed, why don't you just get rid of it? Even though it's a little bit more work, right? But I want to end with a verse from Proverbs 17:3. It says, "The fining pot is for silver, and the furnace for gold, but the Lord trieth the hearts." What exactly does that mean? It means that not everything that you see is going to look like it's producing what you actually want it to produce. And sometimes you may have an image of your mind of what's going on, and the other person has an image of in their mind what's going on. But if you don't communicate properly, then the whole relationship is going to fall apart. And so you have to be direct. You have to be honest. Because there's a difference between like banter and dishonesty. You can banter, but if you're being dishonest, then you're not going to get that furnace of gold. And when it says that the Lord trieth the hearts, what that means is that you're going to be tested not always externally, but internally the most when the fruits of your labor are about to be reaped and you're about to reap what you sow. So I hope this message was useful and insightful. And if you're interested in a consultation, please look in the email description below. And also, if you want to check out the website that I have, it's also going to be in the description below. And there's a bunch of t-shirts and art that is supposed to be as a recognition of the kingdom of heaven. And my art is my worship, so that's really the way that I think about it. And I also have a new channel that is basically just music so far, but I'll put that link in the description box below as well if anybody wants to go check out the music that I've made there. Peace be with you. Till next time.